call the meeting back in recess and continue on with the next agenda item. Agenda item D is the Climate Trust Financial Audit for 2021 and the annual update. This is an information item. We have Todd Cornett, Odo, Assistant Director for Siting and the Council Secretary, as well as Kyler Sherry, the Climate Trust Program Manager. Todd is going to step up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief, and then I'll turn over to the majority of the agenda item will be, which will be an update from Kyler Sherry from Climate Trust. So for the related to the council's carbon standard, there is part of that is having a qualified organization to be able to receive offset funds and put those in projects. And so there are certain elements related to an entity that they have to do in order to continue to be a qualified organization, as that term is defined. And one of those is really what I'm going to be bringing up today, and I've done this annually for some time, and that is having a financial audit. And so I'm just going to, I don't have a slide, so I'm just going to go to the staff report and read some of the staff report, which is to continue to be recognized as a qualified organization for the purpose of receiving funds for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions necessary to meet the carbon emission standard with energy facilities that emit carbon dioxide. The Climate Trust must comply with, and there are two references, and the administrative rule references is exactly the same as the statutory reference, and I won't read those, but I will read the language. Has made available on an annual basis, beginning after the first year of operation, a signed opinion of an independent certified public accountant stating that the qualified organization's use of funds pursuant to this statute conforms with generally accepted accounting procedures, except that the qualified organization shall have 1 year to conform with generally accepted accounting principles in the event of a non-conforming audit. And so essentially what the staff report does is it pulls out some language, and I won't read that, from an independent third party, which does the evaluation, and consistent with past years, the opinion of the third party basically affirms that they are doing everything consistent with all of the financial statements and meeting all of the generally accepted accounting principles of the United States of America. And so basically, you know, the end result is, yes, once again, they've confirmed that they are meeting that requirement. And in terms of continuing to be a qualified organization, at least from this particular perspective, they continue to meet that requirement. So, like I said, I was going to be fairly brief on this, and I can go into any, if you council members have any questions, I can certainly go into more detail than that, but it's articulated in the staff report. Attached to the staff report is that actual account summary, you know, from the entity. But like I said, I can certainly answer any questions you may have.
Anyone have any questions for Todd?
On the Climate Trust in general?
Well, this was specific to the accounting thing.
Okay.
But certainly if you have any questions for me related to the Climate Trust, I can try to answer those. I'm sure Ms. Sherry could also try to answer this.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Well, then if there's nothing else from Todd, then we'll pass it over to Kyler Sherry, please. Welcome.
Hey everyone, can you hear me well, or?
Yes.
Okay. Through my computer, it sounds kind of like you guys are in a tunnel. So yeah, thanks for letting me present today. I'm Kyler Sherry. I am now actually the COO at the Climate Trust, and I am here to provide our annual report on the previous year. So all the numbers that I'm going to show today are as of December 31st, 2021, just to make that clear. And how does it work best? Can I change these slides, or do I need a request to go to the next one?
We'll just
Oh, okay. Thanks. I was trying to click around and it wasn't moving. All right. So a real brief overview. I'll go quickly into the Climate Trust. I think a lot of this you guys probably have seen before, but in case there's any new members, the status of the CO2 standard. So where we're at as a qualified organization, spending down the funds on offsets. Our performance, where are we spending the money, what kind of offsets we are going after, and locations, and then just closing thoughts on the status of the voluntary carbon offset market, and then I'm here to answer any questions that you guys may have. Next slide, please. So the Climate Trust, we are one of the oldest carbon entities in the country. We were founded in 1997. We are also one of the only nonprofit carbon offset developers in the country as well. Our mission is to combat climate change by funding and managing projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. When we started in 97, the carbon markets were very nascent. They still are. But at that time, the Climate Trust was mainly involved in piloting new carbon offset project types. At that time, a lot of the work was done to develop protocols that could quantify the emission reductions from different project types. And back then, we worked more on industrial type projects. So anaerobic digesters at livestock, truck stop electrification. And then since then, we have pivoted to developing projects. And our focus now is on improved forest management, IFM. That is when you change your management practices of a forest to improve sequestration and also avoid emissions from the cutting of trees. We also work on avoided grassland conversion projects. Those projects protect grasslands in perpetuity from being converted to cropland. When you convert cropland, you lose soil carbon. So we're protecting those. And then we also have started to work on reforestation projects with a focus on post-wildfire lands. So since inception, we've committed $58 million to carbon offset projects. And then in 2017, we actually invested $5.5 million in 7 US-based carbon offset projects. The point of that fund that we developed was to prove carbon offsets as an asset, which we are seeing now happen. People are now seeing carbon as a commodity. We work in the compliance and voluntary market. The compliance market is mainly based out of California and Quebec. Washington has recently released climate legislation, and they will include offsets. And then Oregon did start climate legislation as well, but they are not going to include offsets in those rules. So we will not be involved in that market. We also work in the voluntary market. That is the space that is growing the most that we're working in. That is when you sell offsets to individuals, companies, utilities, and local governments. One of the bigger new groups getting involved in that space is actually investors and speculators who are purchasing offsets as an investment. So they're buying credits and holding on to for them for a few years, expecting the value of carbon to increase. And that, interestingly, has even included like blockchain groups and crypto groups, which is totally new for us and something that we're exploring. And then the last thing about the Climate Trust that I'll mention too is we're a little different than your typical nonprofit. We do not go after many grants. We were just awarded a $15 million grant underneath the USDA commodities. But that was the first one that we've gotten and received since I have been here since 2018. So most of the funding that we receive comes from commitments from long-term purchasers of offsets who pay us a fee for each offset that we provide. And then we also buy and sell carbon offsets. So we maintain a pretty robust portfolio as a way to maintain cash flow to put into our projects. And as a nonprofit, and I think that this made it into this year's audit, every dollar that we make, 92% of it goes back towards carbon offset projects and landowners. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview. As Todd mentioned, we are a qualified organization to receive funds. Site certificate holders have 3 options. Whenever they're expanding, they can either build a cogeneration plant, they can choose to manage their own carbon offset portfolio, or they can work with the Climate Trust as a qualified organization to purchase offsets on their behalf. So we kind of act as the fiduciary by going through the valuation processes of where we'll deploy the money to different projects. Our requirements as the qualified organization is we must commit 60% of all offset funds received within 2 years of the facility's construction start date. We can spend no more than 20% on management, and we retire the offsets on behalf of the Oregon program. So all this information is public, so you would go into the registries and you can see our label as any project that we purchase credits from. They all say the facility name and then retired on behalf of the Oregon program. We provide a report every 5 years that's more extensive. And then we also provide annual facility status reports. I normally send those out the first week of May each year. And then as this is our annual audit submitted and our presentation to FSAC. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I thought it'd be a little bit bigger. So it was requested this year that I show all the total payments received from each facility. I hope that the names on the left line up with how you guys go by the facilities. You can see that we received a total of $32 million since inception in '97 from all the facilities. This includes our selection and contracting fees as well. So not all of the 32 million goes directly towards purchasing offsets. The selection and contracting fees, that is used for contract negotiations, networking. It's becoming a really competitive market, so it allows us to go out, meet with different groups and go through our risk committee, which is our evaluation process. And it also supports us in managing the projects to make sure that the offsets are actually issued and delivered to the Climate Trust for retirement. Next slide, please. So this is just the status of the facilities. Many of the facilities, we have obligated all of the cash to projects and retired credits on behalf of them. Just to note, sorry, I'm traveling for work right now, and so I'm in the hotel and someone's just knocking the door. So just note, all of these facilities, we have made the 60% commitment, and we submitted audited reports at that time. In 2020, we did have a large de-obligation from one project that transitioned to low carbon fuel standard. When the project transitioned to low carbon fuel standard, we realized we would not receive any more offsets for that from that project. So many of the facilities have more unobligated cash in 2021 than they did in 2020. Our plan is so we have 7.2 million at the end of 2021 left. Our plan is to spend down all of the funds by the end of 2025, with the last credits being issued in 2026. So at this time, our plan is to spend 1.4 million per year on offsets. And the way that we're doing the structure of purchasing the credits now, as opposed to years prior, is the futures market has become more competitive. So we are choosing to purchase offsets more in the spot market as opposed to entering long-term agreements. This also helps us hedge risk, because in the long-term agreements, sometimes projects might change and then you end up not getting offsets from them. So then the cash becomes unobligated cash once again. Next slide, please. So as part of the Oregon program, we try to purchase credits from the state of Oregon so that we are using Oregon dollars within the state. Oregon does not have that many carbon offset projects at this time. We have funded with Oregon dollars 22 projects in the state of Oregon out of 33 total that Oregon dollars have been used towards. That's been 7.7 million commitment to Oregon projects. Of every dollar that we've received from the program, 45 cents has been spent within the state of Oregon so far, and we've retired 1 million credits from offsets in Oregon. Next slide, please. So in 2021, we almost spent $1 million of Oregon funds on carbon offset purchases. We retired a little over 100,000 offsets on behalf of the program. To date, 71% of funds have been committed. And like I mentioned just on the last slide, we hope to submit the final report in 2026 and retire the last credits in 2026. I also realized now that we have received 2 true-up payments from 2 facilities this year. So if that continues, this will be extended past 2026. Next slide, please. So the state of the voluntary carbon market, the Climate Trust, we purchase credits from the American Carbon Registry, Verra, and Climate Action Reserve. Registries, they are the governing body of offsets, so they develop peer-reviewed protocols that quantify the emission reductions from carbon offset projects. They also work with verification teams to verify that what we say is happening from the projects is actually happening. We choose to work with these 3 registries because of their high integrity. So they require that, and all carbon offset projects do this, that the offset is permanent. So, and if there is an insurance pool in case the offset is reversed, that the offset is additional, which means it's above business as usual. Had the carbon funding not come in, this carbon reduction would not have occurred, and that the project prevents leakage. So a reduction in a greenhouse gas emission from one project area won't end up with an increase in emission reductions from another project area. In 2021, the voluntary carbon market hit $1 billion in annual transaction in US dollars. That is a global number. So the market is rapidly expanding as more corporates are making commitments for climate action plans and carbon neutrality. With the Oregon CO2 standard dollar since inception, the average price of offsets was $5.38. But in 2020 and 2021, even in the face of COVID, carbon offset prices have continued to go up, and the average price of purchase in those 2 years was $8.67. The average price of new contracts that the Climate Trust has entered into in 2021 was $11.29, and that has continued to go up in 2022. We have seen in the past few months prices go slightly down by about $1 or $2 because of the recession and global economics, but at conferences and economic forecasts still see that the dollar value of carbon offsets continue to increase, even in the face of impending recessions and economic turmoil. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview of our governance. So the Climate Trust, we have a finance committee, a compensation committee, and a risk committee. The board chair supervises our executive director, and we work with all of these groups or all of these committees to approve our offset contracts. The risk committee is where the Oregon Offset Committee comes in. The Oregon Offset Committee reviews all contracts and our evaluations of projects that we might be using Oregon funds for the purchase of offsets. Next slide, please. This is just the organization. I think last year when I presented in June of 2021, we were a staff of 4, so we have continued to grow. We've added 4 members in the past year, and we plan on adding 3 more in the next few months, especially now that we've received this USDA commodities grant. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of the board of directors. We are currently reviewing to add another Northwest Energy Council member, and I think we're also in the process of adding a direct board member as well. Next slide, please. And that's it. So if I'm here for any questions that you might have, or if you want to go back and look at the status of the facilities, I'm happy to do that as well.
Thank you very much. I'd ask if members have any questions, comments. Yes, Cindy.
Cindy Conant, thank you for that presentation. I just have a question on the performance by facility. And just if you go to let me go back, that side. So for the Avangrid climate cogeneration, just trying to understand how these numbers work. So it looks like that the project number 2 is relatively old, from the previous slide, but it's less than half of the funds obligated, and I'm just wondering about that 60% requirement. Yeah.
Yeah, so we hit the 60% requirement of cash obligated, and we were in a forward sale, so payment on delivery, but we entered into an agreement to purchase credits from a project for about 10 years. That project ended up switching to low carbon fuel standard. So cash that was obligated to go towards offsets then became unobligated. And so when we're allocating funds from the Oregon program, we kind of treated all of the facilities as one big program, but we always make sure that if something does fall below the 60% threshold, that we spend money from that facility specifically first. So this year in 2022, we've spent $2 million so far. Most of that was in the winter time. So when you see this next year, the Klamath Cogeneration project will go back to that 60% threshold. So the cash obligated does not necessarily mean that that cash has gone out yet. It can be just obligated in a forward contract. But at this time, no Oregon facilities are obligated offsets from our forward contract. So all the cash obligated on this screen has actually gone out. Does that help clear that up?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Cindy.
Sorry.
Any other questions? Well, we thank you for coming to present to us and the work that you are doing. We will look forward to seeing you next year.
Great.
Thank
All right. Good luck with the rest of the meeting. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes agenda item D. Moving on to agenda item E, we have recycling of wind turbine components. This is an information item. We have Daniel Perry, Wind Asset Manager for Brookfield Renewable, who will provide an overview for us. Patiently waiting.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. If we go to our first slide, so for the few folks who are newer to the council, Cindy, how you doing? So a brief overview of Shepherd's Flat. So I first got out to Shepherd's Flat in 2013, so I've had various roles at the facility over that time. So mainly with General Electric, who's the turbine manufacturer. And Shepherd's Flat is comprised of 3 individual sites, but it's tied into Bonneville's grid at one point. So in short speak, we summarize it as one facility, even though it's 3 individual sites. So for example, Shepherd's Flat North went into operation in 2011. So it's 106 turbines, which produce 265 megawatts. So all of our turbines on site are 2.5 megawatt machines. Shepherd Central went into operation in 2012, 116 turbines, 290 megawatts. Shepherd South went into operation in 2012 as well, 116 turbines, 290 megawatts. So the entire site makes up 845 megawatts. So when the wind is churning through the gorge, or a significant portion of the grid in the Northwest, right? It's larger than the retired coal plant that used to be near us in Boardman. Pretty large, significant facility. The site sits on about 37,000 acres, so also very key in the community, making sure we're taking care of our counties, taking care of our landowners. So part of this process has been with the council. So the installed blades were measured for 48.7 meters. And in 2019, the previous organization. So what I also should point out is that Caithness Energy constructed, went into the, site certificate with Odo in 2008. So that was Caithness Energy out of New York. And then Brookfield Renewable purchased the site in 2021. So in 2019, Caithness came to the council and we got a site amendment for Shepherd Central to do a demonstration on this concept of putting on longer blades. And so it was a demonstration to prove the concept that the foundations could support longer blades, which increased the load. Tower section could, as well as the existing infrastructure, the collection system and cabling that gets this power to the grid. So we did that in coordination with Odo. We inspected those foundations as one of our site conditions. And everything worked well, everything passed, and those turbines performed well and had about a 20% gain, an annual energy production gain, so a significant gain. And as Brookfield purchased the site, they entered into a repowering agreement with General Electric, the equipment manufacturer. Part of our site amendment by Odo, one of the conditions, condition 111 at Shepherd South specifically, called out the recycling of components, but namely the blades. So the recycling at the facility is always encouraged and always attempted at every turn. But specifically, it called out reuse or recycling of our blades. So to start with, again, as I mentioned, we have 338 turbines at the facility within the 3 sites. Not all turbines could be repowered with our longer blades. And so the repowering was moving the blade from 48.7 meters and extending it to 62.2 meters. So again, a significant increase, a 15 meter or so increase, as we discussed earlier. Not all turbines could, because they were too close to I-84, too close to a property boundary. So we ended up with 317 turbines on site being repowered. And just for the general awareness, so the turbine manufacturer was able to just designate a company. They hired a company to do all recycling, all disposal of everything on site. So one company had the sole job to take every gearbox, which is not light, right? So our gearboxes are 50,000 pounds a piece. So, and then Dwayne showed some of these pictures last meeting in the presentation. So showed Dwayne, so our gearbox, and then there's an upper bed plate which holds these drivetrains together, and then the hub which holds the blades together, and then the blades. So all of these kind of 4 major components are extremely heavy, and it's very expensive to recycle. It is. And they've done a great job at coordinating that, because you need cranes for all of those lifts. And then you need heavy duty trucks and flatbeds to be able to haul them. So majority of those large metal pieces were recycled in Portland by Schnitzer Steel.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
This is Marcy. I just want to make sure, because I got hung up on the 50,000 pound. So the 4 elements that you said, all 4 of those were being, I lost myself in 50,000.
Yes, ma'am. No worries. So unfortunately, I didn't include a picture of the gear. So the gearbox is hiding up in this picture. So the gearbox is 50,000 pounds. And then you have, if you look at the picture, it kind of looks like a smiley face in Dwayne's picture, where it's a gray component that bolts the gearbox to the hub itself. So that's called the upper bed plate. That's another 40,000 pounds. Then this assembly up here is what we call the hub. So the hub holds the 3 blades together, and that gets bolted into the interior of the nacelle of the turbine. So the old hubs as well I think are about 50,000 pounds as well. Each of the old blades was about 17,000 pounds a piece. So the amount of weight that has to be carefully lifted, safely lifted, and put on trucks and then shipped to the recycling facilities, right? Especially with the rising cost of fuel over the summer, not an inexpensive endeavor. But again, that was the commitment. So some feedback to the council, because it was in our site certificate, we were able to have that discussion early on, just from a practical standpoint. So we were able to go to our contractor early on and say, here's our rules, here's what we have to follow, make this happen. So by having that in our site certificate, we were able to plan, you know, they had a full year of planning on how they were going to execute. And so they knew the exact standard that they had to meet for all of our components on site. So not easy, but because they had plenty of warning, plenty of coordination, we were able to pull that off. So not complete, we're still about 3 weeks from having the last component be recycled, but we're very close. So this, and again, if you go to the next slide, ma'am. So specifically so out here, this is Shepherd South, looking at the winter wheat that was harvested. Again, just showing a picture of the old blades which are up in the air, and then our new blades there stacked on the ground, waiting to be ready to be assembled and then lifted. Can we go to the next slide, ma'am? And the challenging part, which hadn't been done in Oregon for sure, had not been done before, and this magnitude had not been done in the states that we're aware of yet, is then recycling over 900 blades. As I mentioned, we did 317 turbines that we repowered, which then, if you do the math, that's over 900 blades that then have to go somewhere. And the council was cognizant of some of the other repowerings that had happened in the Western United States, where blades had just ended up in landfills. And that was definitely not the end goal that anybody wanted to have. But also 900 blades going anywhere, it was not possible when we first went into this project. So I visited the facility. If you could go to the next page, ma'am.
Sure.
So I actually visited them.
So,
Yes, sir.
Marcy?
Yes.
Question. Can you go back to that last slide?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Just curious, how do you cut those?
Yes, sir.
And if you're gonna get to that, that's fine. I'm just, seeing sort of
No, this
the
is,
cut edge. I'm just curious on.
this is a good part. And so they actually get cut again, hot dog style. If you have kids, you understand that. So they get cut again through the middle. So again, we didn't know either, because these are made of wood and fiberglass. And so we needed to not have fiberglass go everywhere. And during the windy season, that's a challenge. So what they brought out is they brought out a tree cutting service that had excavators with blades and then water recycling pumps on the blades. So they would set tarps and collection system under one entire blade, and then they would march this excavator. So it had a large diamond blade that's spinning on the excavator. So a large diamond blade that would march through and cut the blades into sections. And then they found an easier way, about 100 blades into it. They found an easier way of stacking, and they improved their efficiency. But so they cut again, and then they just stack them like Pringles chips, actually. So they stack them up on the back of a flatbed, and they're able to haul them off. But it's actually a tree cutting service. And so they're able to collect all of the fiberglass fines, pump that, recycle that, and then they're able to, so that just gets straight disposed, that fiberglass. But no, very, very good question. Was not easy at the beginning, but it was a very efficient, safe, and actually clean way of getting these cut up, because again, they're too long to just be shipped. So they need to be manageable as they leave the site for permitting as well, just as safety, right? So these ones here are 48.7 meters, and you can't just have them driving up and down the normal highways.
So just to kind of put a point on that as well, when those are going out originally, it's a very complex endeavor to get those blades in that length out onto the site. There is really tricky getting off of the highway, getting off of interchanges. So, I mean, obviously it makes sense when you're trying to get them off site to cut them down into smaller sites, because it is very, very difficult
Oh, I see.
in these rural areas to get them on site.
And oh, sorry, good.
go, you had a thought going, so go ahead and then.
I was gonna say, so because our repower had a very limited scope, so if you take a similar site in Arlington, they exchanged the whole nacelle. They put in a whole new nacelle, a whole new generator. Ours had very few large components, so we weren't able to spare the blades going off to be reused. So everything had to go to be recycled, right? There couldn't be any additional profit from the components coming down. However, other sites are able to reuse these blades, so they can take them down within their portfolio based on how many new components go up. They can take down their blades, clean them, and use them at other facilities. So our contract didn't allow that. But again, that's a possible use for some of the other blades that come down, is if you have neighboring sites with the same technology, you can use them there.
Well, that opens up so many questions. Ken?
Yeah, so, thank you, Chair Guerrero. So this exercise you were doing was the first time in Oregon, the first time you guys have done it. You were breaking new ground, inventing as you went along.
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
That's cool.
So if you go to the next slide, so again, we had heard rumors of what then happened, and I had to see it. So I had to see it. And so I did. I went out to Missouri. So these blades are from Shepherd Central. I saw them get cut up, and then I took an airplane and met them in Missouri. So some of our blades are being transported by rail, and there was a log jam of components with the rail, and so some had to be trucked. So these ones were trucked. So this is an abandoned rock quarry in Missouri. And this is the only company that could guarantee that they could process 900 blades. So what they do here, you see, as I mentioned, so we cut the blades up several times. They get strapped down like Pringles. And this begins the process here of shredding. So they're able to take each section of these blades, they put them into their big chip shredder. It was originally designed for wood, and they worked with the manufacturer. Some of the component is actually harder than wood. So some of the angles, some of the tips are harder than wood, and they were breaking their crusher. So they had to reinforce it. If you can go to the next slide. And so this gets chipped down into several different dimensions, and then is actually used in 5 local concrete facilities, the end product. So the end product gets continually chipped down and shredded down into a finer product, and it gets used in 5 of the local concrete facilities making concrete. And again, so this is an hour and a half north of St. Louis, so it serves a pretty large area on the Missouri. But again, the only facility that was able to take on the amount of work. And so they, again, a great little facility that they've got there, and they were starting to receive other blades from other states as well. So they're going to continue to expand and be able to, as well, in the future, expand into what the end product can turn into. So several people have ideas of trying to make them into press board or trying to turn them into pallets, but the scale isn't there. So when these repowers occur, you end up with hundreds of blades. So a facility needs to have that space, needs to have the large equipment to move those, process them in a pretty quick manner, right? So our goal was to have all of our components off-site as the repower is finished. We couldn't have our components sitting in the farmer's field as they're trying to plant their wheat over the winter. So that, again, our blades are almost gone, almost off-site. As the repower winds down in the next month, it'll be clear, and they'll be able to process the rest of those.
Sorry, please. So given that this is the only country that you guys are aware of, the only facility in the country that you're aware of that can take that volume of blades, and now you said they're also starting to get blades from other states, do you have any concern that in the next several years, as more repowering occurs and more recycling of blades needs to done, but there won't be a place at this facility will no longer be able to accommodate it. There might not be places to go.
Well, no, sir, because we're a very large site, so they're not gonna get 900 blades ever at once all again. So I don't think that's an issue, but they were looking to expand as well. So they had additional rock quarry ground that they could hold. You know, they could receive it, hold it, and then process as they catch up. So, and again, now that they've proven the concept, I also assume that other companies will try and get into that vein as well. So you may get also some farmers and some of their hurricane chippers try to process blades at the same time. So this is the first that we're aware of on this scale, but I assume other companies will try it in the future.
Marcy, this is Daniel. Yeah, Daniel, so what percentage of the blade is wood?
Can you go back 2 slides? Can you zoom in at all, do you think? On the top of there? If not, that's okay. So the exact percentage, I don't know. I was just gonna show you a couple, so you can see a couple of the parts. So a couple of the internal structures as they sit, cross-section wise. So those are wood, but yeah, a lot of it's, fiberglass.
Yeah, so my concern was wood and concrete.
Right, so some of it gets processed and is actually the heat source for the cement.
Oh.
So they're able to, yeah, right, so you saw that they had multiple conveyor belts.
Yeah.
So they had, when I was visiting, they had 2 piles. And so it sounded like one was actually getting mixed with cardboard.
Oh.
And then they were using that as a heat source as opposed to, their fossil fuel heat source for the cement. But that's how I understood the process to go.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the fiberglass in concrete, but the wood would, reduce the integrity of the concrete.
Yes, sir.
Cindy?
Yeah, I got a question. I'm curious if you had mentioned, well, just as blades are replaced with larger and larger blades, is there a resale market for the smaller blades? Do you see that happening? And I'm
Yes,
curious if-
those blades could have been sold for a pretty penny. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So some blades are worth more than others. Some blades hold their value. Some have better craftsmanship, a better manufacturer. But yes, that's definitely a market that's there, the secondary sale of older components. Because that style with this is actually wood from Brazil. That style is not manufactured anymore. So if a site had these blades and lightning destroyed a blade, just any damage to a blade that's non-repairable, that they would be out of luck. So there is a market for certain types of blades, definitely.
Yeah. So as blades are replaced, is there a difference in longevity as you replace blades? Do the first blades only last X number of years, but the longer blades last?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So we're expecting these new ones to be another 30 years from now. So the original blades, I believe, were a 20-year lifespan. We're expecting the new blades to be 30-year lifespan. So again, the repowering, one of the beneficial aspects is the infrastructure of the site's already there. So our substation is already there. All of the roads and the cabling and the towers are there. So if your towers can sustain the longer blades and the more weight, your infrastructure is already there. So you can get 20 to 30% more out of your wind park and another 20 to 30 years for 40% of the cost of a brand new build. So you're piecing together older technology with newer technology that's going to perform better and last longer. Yes, sir.
Good, yeah.
Thank you. Did you recoup anything in like selling the, what's the way I'm gonna say this, the ground up fiber.
The scrap value.
Is there scrap value that you were able to recoup anything?
I'm not aware of that. I'm not in that. So
No
our-
incentive there then, really?
I'm not sure. Our goal was just to properly dispose of it, recycle everything. I don't know on how that works. So with the cost of fuel, it was this summer.
2,000 miles.
So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure there was anything. I'm not aware. I'm not.
Yes, Cindy.
So I'm just curious, if we certainly include conditions for recycling or resale of the material, what your lessons learned in this project or that may inform us as going forward, what others could learn from you, what we could learn.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I think we've covered them already as being able to fall back on our site condition that our contractor will follow these rules. And then be able to coordinate and find the facilities that can accommodate. And certainly so having Portland here as a larger hub was able to take a lot of the metals, but they did fill up. So at one point we had to reroute and we were sending to a recycling facility to the east of us because Portland could not take any more of our components.
It came to
Just-
grant.
That's right. Yeah.
We have a good article in the paper about B&K Auto Salvage taking the cells and the gears.
Yes, sir. Yep. So just having the other infrastructure in place, of again, so depending on where your wind farm is, being able to offload to reputable recycling facilities. Again, not easy to find in some cases.
I think the other point is that we shouldn't limit the recycling opportunities to disposal. We should look at, are there opportunities to redevelop?
Right.
I think we should be broad enough in our requirement that we allow applicant that opportunity to explore.
That's good.
And my question on resale, that's a recycling.
Reuse.
Reuse.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
it certainly would recoup. I mean, you get a lot more bang for your buck to do that than you would to have to ship it all the way to Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. I think that's good to know that.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Perry, I have to tell you, coming off the lunch, there's always that lull afterwards, and I think you got us re-engaged and energized, and thank you for coming in person. I know, I don't know where you live, but I guess over east somewhere, so, I appreciate you doing that on a Friday. It makes it easier for us to have a more engaged dialogue, and I hope that if we will come up with more questions, that you'll be willing to join us again.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate the council's support over the years. I don't envy your traffic here.
Sticks, I live in 2,500 person county, so it's not a problem.
We're only used to sheep traffic out on the site. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was interesting, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see, let me get back to my list. Christopher, you come back to us. What a guy. We are on agenda item F. This is the 2022 site certificate amendment rulemaking for council's action. We again have citing policy analyst and rules coordinator Christopher Clark to present. Christopher, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Grill, members of the council. Once again, for the record, this is Christopher Clark, the council's rules coordinator. During this agenda item, we'll be talking about the 2022 site certificate amendment rulemaking. During this presentation, I'll provide brief background and procedural history of the prior amendment rulemakings that we've worked on. I'll discuss the needed authority for the council to conduct this rulemaking, scope and objectives of what we hope to accomplish with the project, potential fiscal and economic impacts and methods to expand public input. And then I'll go over the next steps, followed by council's deliberation and recommendations. As a note, this is at the very beginning of this rulemaking project, so what we're asking the council for today is the council's authorization to initiate the rulemaking. As I'll describe, we have some process before we really get into the full kind of informal rulemaking proceedings that we normally go into. Okay, so as background, many of you were here, but not all of you. In October of 2017, the council adopted permanent rules amending the procedures for amendments of site certificates in OAR Chapter 345, Division 27. That set of rules was challenged and a judicial review was requested. And on August 1st, 2019, the Supreme Court issued a decision finding that those rules were invalid on one procedural issue, and I think there were a couple of substantive issues there too. The council went through temporary rulemaking to replace those rules, and then on January 24th of 2020, the council adopted permanent rules, which replaced those invalid rules with a set of new but substantively similar rules. So much of the text was the same, but these are new rules, not an amendment of those existing rules. At that time, the council committed to reopening those proposed rules within 2 years. Those rules were also challenged, and in May 2021, the court issued a new decision in this new case declaring specific provisions of those rules to be invalid. And those provisions are related to limitations on the ability to seek judicial review when there's no contested case. And I think the ability to forego an amendment when the site boundary is expanded. Those rules are still on the books, but they're no longer effective because of the court's decision. Okay.
So why did the court reject or basically invalidate the whole rule and not just those sections?
So
That's a question for you, Pat.
I will clarify. In 2019, when they did the first rulemaking, there was a decision that invalidated the entire rule set because there was a procedural error related to the department or the council not responding to a request for a statement of objectives in writing. In 2021, the court limited their decision to invalidating just the sections of rule that are there. They didn't invalidate the order adopting the other rules. So the other rules are still good. It's just these 3 sections that are currently appear in the rule set but aren't valid, but the rest of the rules are valid.
Mr. Patrick, the idea of being handling, and you're probably already aware of this, when there's a procedural error that's considered to impact the rules as an entire set of rules. That's why the court said whole rule package is being sent back because of the procedural.
Thank you.
There was a substantive issue in the 2019 thing that we attempted to address and when we adopted those rules. And so these were additional issues that came up afterwards. Okay, so for the need and authority for this rulemaking, the statute provides that the site certificate may be amended with the approval of the Energy Facility Siting Council, and that the council may establish by rule the type of amendment that must be considered in a contested case proceeding. The court has found that because there's virtually no statutory procedural requirements in the amendment process, the legislature has allowed the council to develop that process as it sees fit. So the council or the courts have upheld your authority to kind of have broad authority of what you do, unlike applications which have a very well-defined process in statute. I just want to clarify that you do have authority to do different things than what's done for applications and amendments. So that's there. As far as the need for this rulemaking, when the council adopted the permanent rules in January 2020. I have that error, this being listed as 2019, kind of now coming back to me when my timing issues were weird, but these new 2020 rules, the council committed to going back and reopening them within 2 years to address outstanding issues that were raised by stakeholders during that rulemaking, and then to address provisions of the rule which the court found exceeded the council's statutory authority. So that's the two main things that we want to focus on, these like addressing these remaining issues and addressing that court decision that came out after these rules were issued. The kind of third thing that we need to do is that because those rules were adopted as new permanent rules, we have to do what's generally called a 5-year review. I just want to clarify that that doesn't mean we have to do it after the rules have been in place for 5 years. It just means that within the first 5 years that those rules are in place, we have to do this review. We kind of we're recommending that the council do that now as part of this rulemaking. And we did want to point out that it has been about 5 years since that 2017 rule set came into place. So even though we don't have the full experience and data points of the new rule set for 5 years, we have seen how they've operated for about the equivalent period because the provisions were so similar. Okay, so as far as scope and objectives, like the prior rulemakings, we want to focus on two things, which is really making this process more efficient and effective, and then ensure that there's adequate opportunities for public participation. This isn't identical to the objective statement that was included in those last two, but we think it is a accurate representation of what we hope to accomplish during this rulemaking. As far as scope, the department's recommending that the rulemaking address, like I said, all those outstanding issues from the earlier rulemaking, including particularly issues related to when an amendment is required. So curing the issue of particularly site certificate amendments when there is a addition to the site boundary, making that more clear in the rules, and then reviewing the opportunities for public notice and participation in the different review processes, including provisions for contested case hearings. And I can kind of go into what that looks like now, but you'll be hearing a lot about these rule sets for a long time, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. We also want to kind of allow flexibility in the scope to address any new issues that are raised during the development of the 5-year review report. And I will talk about how we intend to develop that report in a minute. Okay, so getting to fiscal and economic impacts, which we know is important, and we will ask our Rules Advisory Committee about. We do recognize that this rulemaking could increase some time and costs associated with processing a request for amendment, particularly if there's additional opportunities for public notice or public comment or contested case proceedings are added. We acknowledge that those could increase the cost during the review process, but we do want to say that enhancing opportunities for public participation, giving the council to address the opportunity to address issues raised by the public, and hopefully disposing of contested case issues in a manner that's amenable to the parties will make the process more efficient overall, even if it does increase some of the upfront time needed to get through an amendment request. Okay, so that said, we do need to get public input on what the proposed rule changes will be. The council's already committed to having a rules advisory committee for this rule project. We still believe that's the appropriate way to get input on the development of the proposed rules. But before we get there, we're recommending that the council go through this 5-year review process. And we're recommending that council invite public comment to assist in that review, just written public comment. And that when we send out the request for written comment, we also ask persons to basically state whether they're interested in participating in the RAC. and giving us kind of a brief mini RAC application, which we can kind of compile and bring back to you so you can decide who you want to actually be on that committee. Based on the way that the 5-year review statute's written, we're recommending that this notice be given to the advisory committee members from the 2017 rulemaking. And we didn't have a rulemaking in the 2019, 2020 rulemaking. So we'll give notice to them. We will also be giving notice to everybody that signed up on the rulemaking mailing list, which is a few, I think, 1,000 subscribers. So.
Excuse me, or this is Marcy. I don't know what the resting club, 5 years was forever ago. And I get it, the next that you'll have who signs up for it. But is there any concern about doing this thinking, is that just, I don't know, 5 years in my world is, there's very few people that are, I mean, I guess organizations don't change, but companies, I'm just curious about the 17 aspect.
Well, I don't think there's a limitation that you have to wait 5 years. I think it can be done soon. Just, you have to do it within.
I mean, the people that were on the last rack.
Oh,
to use them.
This doesn't list people.
The notice to give to the advisory committee that was appointed to the 2017 rulemaking. So I'm just making a comment that 5 years is a really long time to think that many folks are in the same spaces and places. That's all I'm pointing out.
You know, this list that is provided to us is just organizations. So you're right, it may be different people, but plus the public notification list for rules changes that Christopher has. So yeah, it's going to be a very extensive notification list.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think you're right, you know, people will have changed in these organizations.
Chair, if I may clarify one thing, the Administrative Procedure Act requires us to send the report to all the members of the advisory committee that was appointed to review the draft rules. It doesn't, I have to go back and actually check to see if it has this notice, but the typical practice is that you reach out to those people to say, well, this is what we all talked about. Like, did it actually happen the way we thought it would?
Understood.
Yeah, but there has been a large amount of staff turnover in some of those organizations that participated. So whether or not they'll have anything to say or even really remember the details is questionable.
Thank you.
Just as a quick update on kind of what this 5-year review looks like, there's 5 questions that the statute requires be kind of responded to. It's whether the rule had the intended effect, whether the anticipated fiscal impact of the rule was underestimated or overestimated, whether there's been subsequent changes in law that require the rule to be repealed or amended, whether there's a continued need for the rule and what the impacts the rule has had on small business. There's not really a statutory requirement to make changes on that, but since we know there's other changes that the council needs to make and other issues that we want to consider, we're just assuming that this will feed into, the report will feed into this kind of scoping exercise for the rulemaking. So if you approve our recommendation today and initiate rulemaking, we will try to get that a notice requesting the comments on the 5-year review and soliciting interest in the RAC out next week. There's an amended, or there's a draft notice attached to the staff report. We don't have to set any specific deadline for this. We've recommended that we set the deadline for December 1st to give a full 30-day comment period. And that would also allow us to kind of bring back our preliminary findings, or if we're done, the complete 5-year review to you at your December meeting. But I would say, depending on the volume of comments we get back, that could very well likely be later than December.
So this is Marcy, and I'm just gonna ask the question. We are coming up on the holiday season. What impact is there? Because I know when we, as an observer of the audience, listening to Beat Age, I forget what holiday was happening, and we heard that from the public more than once. Are we going to get ourselves in any type of, and I get it, it's a different volume, but even with staff, or Todd, I mean, people take vacations and things during the holidays, so we, no, you don't have vacations.
No, I mean, it's, for the record, Todd Burnett, no, it's a good question, you know, because we get into this time of year and, you know, people take, you know, vacation, you know, before and after the actual holiday. So it's a good thing to ask in terms of, yeah, I think, you know, our recommendation is, yes, initiate this notice and solicit comments, but I think the question then is that date the right date? So is that enough, given, you know, sort of that week around Thanksgiving, you know, that people are gonna have, are they gonna have 30 days, or are they really gonna have 21 days or 22 days based upon kind of holidays? And is that enough?
And
if
I
that's-
defer to you and the team, because I'm not the one that's gonna be processing things. I'm going away for Thanksgiving, so I'm not reading anything. With all seriousness, I just want to make sure that we don't overburden your staff when people are trying to actually get to this time of the year. And then I don't want anybody from the public coming back and chastising us for it. So what do the rest of y'all think? Is it an issue? I'm feeling
It'll never be enough time.
that part is true. Yeah. I look at the staff, I'm sorry. I can say it, your boss can be the Grinch, but I'm looking out for you. Go ahead, Cindy.
Cindy Con, so, actually, when I looked at this, slide, the timing, I thought it was fairly quick. But I guess since it is included, I thought that it had been kind of vetted through, can we do this? On this schedule comfortably? Aren't you going on vacation?
Well-
I've been here.
Yes, and I specifically have weighed both these agenda items. I would have a comment period while I'm gone. So, you know, it'd be coming back to what we get.
Well, excuse me, and then we got Tom.
Yeah.
So how's that, Dean?
And,
Here, buddy, sing your swell or throw in.
it-
So on this one also, you know, it's not like when we bring this back to you, we're looking for your conclusion to do rulemaking, I mean, to create new rules. We're soliciting input on what people think about, are the rules working, or are they not working? And so that's going to then, you know, help, you know, as Chris said, scope out the actual rulemaking, which then we would trigger in 2023, you know, essentially identifying rulemaking advisory committee, you know, having then whatever the number of RAC meetings, trying to, you know, create rules. So this isn't sort of a full packaging of new rules. This is simply soliciting input on what works and what doesn't.
Thank you for that reframing. That makes me feel better for you.
And Chris can correct me if I'm getting into that a little bit off, but that at least it was my understanding is, you know, we're looking for input from people. You know, and it could be that the conclusion of the council is, thanks for that input, we're gonna stick with the rules as they are, and we're gonna conduct rulemaking. That's not what we're recommending. We're already recommending, or at a minimum, you know, the two rules that are not consistent with the Supreme Court decision. We also recognize that, you know, the applicants, certificate holders, you know, have some concerns about the rules. The public does, we know some council members do, we do as well. So we think that, you know, legitimately, you know, this will be a pretty significant and important rulemaking in 2023. This will just help us kind of create that new scope of it. So again, I'll look to Chris to correct me on anything that I got wrong.
Yeah, I think Secretary Cornett's exactly right. And the next step for us is to come back to you with recommendations for Iraq. That process is probably gonna take years, you know, well, a year or more. But one thing I will point out, so this exercise is really limited to answering these 5 questions and then seeing who's interested in being in the RAC. We have a lot on the record already about these 5 questions and what people think about it. But Chair Grow, I will say, I, you know, kind of projected that timeline based on getting this back in front of you, you know, as quickly as possible, but that doesn't give people a lot of time to prepare their comments or gather their thoughts.
So one other point on there. So, I mean, if we wanted to give more time, you know, getting into December, that would be fine. I would also, this probably goes with a lot of things, we're about to hit the long session. And so once we get into the long session, there are a lot of people who participate in the process that may be occupied during the long session as well. So we have to also have cognizant if we push it too far in, we may be bumping up into limitations of the legislative session.
Sorry, that was Marcy's commentary. Go ahead, Cindy.
Just a question about the process. I don't think I've sat in on a 5-year review process. And so with respect to the first 2 bullet points specifically, so when notice is given, you know, when you send out the notice for rulemaking or for input, are they reminded of what the intended effects? Or, you know, so they're answering that question based on actually what was said in 2017? Or are they just, oh, I like it or I don't?
That's a good question, Councilmember Conlon. And typically we don't. And I will say one thing about this rulemaking is that, you know, one, in that original 2017 rulemaking, because of the procedural issue related to statement of objectives, like I think there's controversy about what the intended effect was. So we can put what we said, and I think we do in that draft notice, which I can pull up. But typically, you know, the information is on the record and people can go back and look at that to what they want. But for the notice itself, we kind of just ask the questions generally.
And I'm just thinking, if you can, too much searching for, okay, what was the intent or what was the anticipated fiscal impact? I'm not sure the answer to the question is intended at, but I've been through this.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, in that, you know, that probably should drive what information that we make available on the, kind of the website. So, you know, not just the amendment rules, but, you know, some of the documentation associated with that amendment, you know, rulemaking, needs to be done. So I don't know what, there's a lot of documentation on this rulemaking, so obviously we can't provide all of it. But as a good point, and I think we should pull together, you know, enough information that's available on the website that people can go in there as they want to and look at that.
Yeah, this is handling, this was a lengthy process, this amendment, to the amendment rules. And we had a lot of participation, and I imagine we'll have some more.
And it was challenged. I mean, so I would guess that there's, you know, a lot of interest, and probably people really, they know exactly what the intent was, and, but.
So Councilmember Condon, I pulled up their draft notice here. I think what I attempted to do in these more specific questions was incorporate the statements of objectives and need, kind of the key elements into these more specific questions. But like Secretary Cornett said, I think what we could add fairly easily is, you know, an additional thing that says, you know, there's additional resources related to, we can always put the orders. And if I can find a testimony and response document, you know, put that on the webpage so people can just go there and pull up all the key documents really easily. They're already all on the website, I believe, for this rulemaking. But as Councilmember Jenkins noticed, there's a lot of volume there, so we can winnow that down a little bit.
Motion.
Is that it? Anybody have questions? Hearing none, yes, please.
Madam Chair, I move that the council initiate rulemaking to develop proposed revisions to the rules governing the expiration, amendment, and termination of site certificate under OAR Chapter 345, Division 027, and authorize staff to issue a notice seeking public comment to assist in the 5-year review of rules adopted under the Administrative Order FSEC 1-2020.
Thank you. Do we have, oh,
Second.
thank you, Cindy. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Andy Jenkins,
Yes.
Kent Al,
Yes.
Marcy Graham,
Yes.
Cindy Conner.
Yes.
Motion carries, Madam Chair.
Christopher, your work is done. Thank you.
Or start.
There's the-
Tom's work is started.
Oh, that's nice. You get to delegate. Here you go, buddy. Are there any further comments, questions on today's activities? Well, I would like to say thank you, Christopher. You did have a heavy load today and as always delivered. Nancy, well, I've always done, but Nancy, thank you for taking care of everything. Hearing nothing else, the time is now 12:45 and the October 28th, 22 meeting of the Energy Facility Siting Council is now adjourned. Nice work, folks.
Thank you.